3 days before New Year Eve, I overheard my parents planning to make me their free babysitter for 20 screaming children without even bothering to ask me. I said absolutely nothing. Instead, I quietly booked a first-class ticket to a tropical vacation for myself. On New Year Eve, my mother called my phone screaming at the top of her lungs, demanding to know why I was not at the cabin yet, because everyone was waiting for me. I laughed, took a sip of my margarita, and replied, "Do not wait for me, I am enjoying my vacation." There was a sudden suffocating silence on the other end of the line. A few seconds later, all I could hear was absolute chaos, adults panicking, and children screaming in the background as their perfect upper-class gala imploded. My name is Simone. I am 32 years old and a luxury real estate director in Atlanta. Before I continue this story about how I finally taught my toxic family a lesson they will never forget, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe if you have ever been treated like the family servant and had to stand up for your own peace of mind. The disrespect did not start on New Year Eve. It began as it usually does at my parents' sprawling estate in the most exclusive neighborhood in Atlanta during our annual Christmas Eve dinner. My father, Pastor Calvin, and my mother, First Lady Brenda, run one of the largest mega churches in the city. To the congregation, they are pillars of faith and community. Behind the heavy oak doors of our home, they are obsessed with status politics and appearances. I arrived at the dinner wearing a tailored silk dress, completely exhausted after closing a $3 million property deal that morning. I walked into the grand dining room expecting to take my usual seat near my father. Instead, I saw that the main mahogany table was fully occupied. My brother-in-law, DeAndre, who was currently running for city council, had invited his top political donors and their wives. My sister Tiara sat beside him, playing the perfect political spouse, flashing her pristine veneers at people she secretly despised. My older brother Jamal and his wife Vanessa occupied the remaining seats. I stood there holding a bottle of vintage wine I had brought as a gift. My mother glided over in her custom gown, barely making eye contact as she grabbed the wine from my hands. She pointed toward the corner of the room where a small, cramped folding table had been set up next to the kitchen swinging doors. It was the kids' table occupied by my nieces and nephews, who were throwing peas at each other. She told me she needed my seat for Councilman Davis and his wife, and that I would not mind sitting with the children since I was the only adult without a +1. I did not scream or cause a scene. I quietly walked over to the folding table, pulled up a flimsy metal chair, and sat down. This was my role in the family. Because I was single and childless, my time, my comfort, and my dignity were considered entirely expendable. Dinner progressed with the adults at the main table, laughing loudly, clinking crystal glasses, and discussing campaign finances. I sat quietly, cutting my food while dodging flying mashed potatoes from Jamal and his youngest son. About an hour into the meal, the adults finished their main courses. Vanessa, my sister-in-law, strutted over to the dessert station set up near my miserable little corner. Vanessa was a former pageant queen who wore her title and her massive diamond ring like weapons. She looked me up and down, a condescending smirk playing on her lips. She leaned against the table, intentionally flashing her jewelry. "Simone." She purred, her voice loud enough for the main table to hear. "Since you are single and childless, you are basically free all the time, right? It must be so nice having absolutely zero real responsibilities in the world." I slowly placed my fork down on my plate. I looked at her custom designer dress, recognizing the exact seasonal collection it came from. I knew exactly how much it cost. I also knew exactly how her husband funded it. I wiped my mouth with a napkin, keeping my posture perfectly straight and my expression completely composed. "I do have responsibilities, Vanessa," I said, my voice carrying a smooth, icy calm that made the nearby chatter die down. "For instance, my zero responsibilities pay a very real mortgage on a luxury penthouse. My zero responsibilities also pay for the very designer dress you are wearing right now." Her smirk vanished instantly. Her eyes darted toward the main table where Jamal suddenly looked very interested in his empty wine glass. "What are you talking about?" she stammered, her voice losing its previous volume. I smiled, letting the silence stretch for just a second before delivering the truth. Jamal came to my office last month crying about how the dealership was threatening to repossess his car. I loaned him $2,000 to cover his past due payments. But it seems he decided to spend my money on keeping up your pageant queen appearances instead of paying his debts. So yes, Vanessa, it is incredibly nice having no responsibilities because it allows me to fund the fake lifestyle you are currently bragging about. The color drained completely from her face. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She turned her furious gaze toward Jamal, who was now sweating profusely under the dining room chandelier. The political donors at the table shifted uncomfortably in their seats, pretending not to have heard the exchange, but the damage was done. I had publicly stripped away their facade of wealth and success, using nothing but the absolute truth. I picked up my fork and resumed eating my dinner as if I had just commented on the weather. I did not raise my voice, I did not curse, and I did not break character. I simply held up a mirror to their hypocrisy and let them choke on the reflection. The heavy silence that followed my revelation was quickly shattered by my father. Pastor Calvin stood up from his seat at the head of the table, his face flushed with righteous indignation. He slammed his hand down on the mahogany wood, causing the crystal glasses to rattle. "Simone, that is entirely enough," he boomed, using his authoritative pulpit voice that was designed to command thousands of parishioners. "You will show grace in this house. You do not air family business in front of our esteemed guests. You are deliberately trying to ruin this holy evening with your bitter attitude." I looked at the man who had preached about truth and honesty my entire life, yet could not handle a single dose of reality in his own dining room. "I am just sharing facts, Dad," I replied smoothly. "If the truth ruins the evening, perhaps the problem is the lie you are all trying to maintain." Tiara scoffed loudly from her seat next to DeAndre. She crossed her arms, playing the perfect put-together political wife. "You are just jealous, Simone," she said, her tone dripping with venom. "You sit there alone hoarding your money while the rest of us are actually building families and supporting DeAndre as he prepares to serve the city. You should be uplifting your brother, not tearing him down to make yourself feel better about your empty life." My father nodded in agreement, adjusting his tailored suit jacket. "We are a family of faith and service," he added sternly. "You have been blessed with financial abundance, Simone, but you lack the spiritual maturity to understand sacrifice. Instead of attacking your sister-in-law, you should be asking how you can contribute more to DeAndre and his upcoming campaign events. You need to learn your place and remember who gave you the foundation to succeed." The tension in the room was palpable, heavy enough to suffocate anyone else. But I remained stoic. I finished the last bite of my dinner, placed my napkin neatly on the table, and recognized the absolute truth. My family did not view me as a daughter or a sister. They viewed me merely as a convenient automated teller machine and an unpaid servant expected to fund their delusions of grandeur while sitting quietly in the shadows. I looked at their angry, entitled faces and realized that arguing with them was a complete waste of breath. They wanted me to submit, to apologize, to fall back into line. I gave them a polite, empty smile, knowing exactly what I needed to do next in order to survive this endless cycle of abuse and protect my peace of mind from their manipulation and toxicity. I excused myself from the dining table under the pretense of refilling my ice water. The air in the dining room had grown thick and suffocating after my confrontation with Vanessa and my father. I needed a moment to breathe, a moment away from the piercing glares of people who felt entitled to my hard-earned money while simultaneously looking down on my life choices. As I walked down the long, dimly lit hallway toward the sprawling gourmet kitchen, the sounds of forced laughter and clinking silverware faded behind me. The house was massive, a testament to my parents' highly profitable ministry, decorated with expensive art and imported rugs that screamed of worldly wealth masquerading as divine blessing. I reached the kitchen, grabbed a crystal glass from the cabinet, and pressed the lever on the refrigerator ice maker. The crushed ice tumbled into my glass with a loud clatter. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the rest of the evening, when a sudden murmur of hushed voices caught my attention. The sounds were coming from the opposite end of the hallway, specifically from my father's closed-off sanctuary, his prized mahogany study. This room was strictly off limits during social events, a place where Pastor Calvin conducted his most sensitive church business and handled private counseling sessions. I set my glass down on the granite countertop. The heavy wooden door to the study was left slightly ajar, a sliver of warm amber light spilling out onto the hallway runner. Curiosity overrode my usual desire to mind my own business. I stepped silently across the plush carpet, making sure my heels did not make a single sound. I pressed my back against the wall right beside the cracked door and held my breath. Inside the room, I could clearly hear the panicked, frantic voice of my brother-in-law, DeAndre. He was pacing back and forth, his heavy footsteps thudding against the hardwood floor. My sister Tiara was chiming in with her usual whiny, demanding tone, while my parents attempted to soothe the escalating situation. They had abandoned their esteemed guests in the dining room to hold a secret summit, and the sheer panic in their voices told me this was a crisis of epic proportions. I leaned in closer, straining to catch every single word. The political golden boy was cracking under pressure, and my parents were desperately trying to glue his crumbling facade back together, I realized. Immediately that this secret meeting had absolutely nothing to do with faith, charity, or family values. It was a purely calculated strategy session, a frantic scramble to protect their precious social standing from a massive impending financial disaster. I remained perfectly still in the shadows, realizing that my simple decision to fetch ice had just handed me the ultimate front row seat to their staggering hypocrisy. Let them speak. I thought, waiting patiently to hear the very ugly truth. It was time to learn exactly what they were hiding today. I cannot afford to look broke in front of these donors. DeAndre hissed, his voice trembling with a mixture of rage and raw panic. This New Year Eve gala in Aspen is the cornerstone of my entire campaign. I promised 15 elite couples from the City Council and the megachurch executive board, a completely undisturbed, luxurious couples retreat. Do you understand what that means? It means they expect five-star childcare while they drink champagne and donate to my political action committee. Tiara groaned loudly, dramatically pacing the floor alongside her husband. I know what it means, DeAndre, she snapped back. But the luxury resort just sent over the final invoice for the specialized holiday nanny services. They are demanding $15,000 just to watch 20 screaming children for 3 days. We absolutely do not have that kind of cash sitting around. We have already maxed out 3 credit cards just to secure the grand ballroom and order the catered lobster dinners. If we do not provide the premium childcare we promised in the invitation brochures, Councilman Davis and his wealthy associates will pull their endorsements faster than you can blink. We will be completely ruined. In Atlanta political circles, my father cleared his throat, attempting to inject some pastoral calm into the chaotic room. Now listen here, both of you, he said, his tone thick with condescension. You are panicking over a minor logistical hurdle. We have built an entire ministry on the principle of utilizing our available resources efficiently. You do not need to spend $15,000 on overpriced professional nannies when we have a perfectly capable free resource right under our own roof. DeAndre stopped pacing. What are you talking about? Pastor who is going to watch 20 entitled brats in the middle of a blizzard while the parents get drunk in the ballroom. Nobody in our congregation is flying out to Aspen just to wipe noses for free. The room fell silent for a few seconds. Pressed my ear closer to the crack in the door, already anticipating the vile suggestion that was about to leave their mouths. I knew my family well enough to recognize the exact moment they decided to sacrifice me on the altar of their ambition. My mother, First Lady. Brenda finally spoke up. Her voice was dripping with that signature brand of syrupy manipulation she usually reserved for extracting heavy tithes from vulnerable widows in the front pews. She let out a soft, dismissive chuckle as if the solution was the most obvious thing in the world. Why are you two stressing yourselves out over this nonsense? My mother purred. You are completely forgetting about Simone. She has no husband, no children, and absolutely no social life to speak of. She is already flying out with us. We will simply make her do exactly what we want. Without question, I felt a freezing cold knot quickly form deep inside my stomach, deeply sickened by their relentless greed. I pulled my smartphone from my dress pocket with trembling fingers, but my mind was completely clear. I swiped open the voice memo application and tapped the bright red record button, holding the microphone flush against the narrow gap in the wooden doorframe. Inside the study, DeAndre let out a heavy sigh of relief, though he still sounded slightly skeptical of the wicked plan. "Are you absolutely certain she will agree to this?" he asked, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "You know Simone can be stubborn when she feels like she is being taken advantage of. What if she puts up a fight and refuses to watch them at the last minute? We cannot afford to have these wealthy donors stranded with their kids while they are supposed to be mingling with the city council members." My mother scoffed loudly, the sound vibrating through the heavy mahogany door. "Do not be ridiculous, DeAndre," she commanded, her tone practically oozing with arrogant certainty. "Just throw all the kids in the secondary cabin and tell Simone to watch them. She does not have a family or plans anyway. It is her duty to serve this family. Do not even ask her. Just send the guests' kids to her room when we get there. She will not cause a scene in front of our esteemed church members. You know she hates public confrontation." My father immediately hummed his pastoral agreement, adding his own layer of manipulative justification to the plot. "Your mother is exactly right," he stated firmly. "Simone has always been the responsible one. We simply frame it as an act of service to the ministry. If she complains, I will remind her of all the sacrifices we made to provide her with a comfortable upbringing. She owes us this favor, especially since she has chosen a path of selfish independence rather than building a proper household." Tiara giggled maliciously, completely unbothered by the fact that she was actively conspiring to turn her own sister into an unpaid servant for 20 rowdy children. "Plus," she added, clapping her hands together, "it will save us from having to interact with her miserable attitude during the actual gala. It is a win for everyone involved." I stared at the digital timer on my phone screen as the recording ticked past 60 seconds. I had captured every single word of their cruel, calculating exchange. They truly believed I was nothing more than an obedient workhorse, a disposable asset they could manipulate and exploit without facing a single consequence. I quietly ended the recording, locked my phone screen, and slipped the device safely back into my pocket. My heartbeat was steady, rhythmic, and incredibly calm. There were no tears welling in my eyes, no overwhelming urge to burst into the room and scream at them for their betrayal. I simply turned around and walked silently back down the hallway, leaving their toxic delusions undisturbed. The game had completely changed now, and I held the winning hand. I retreated up the winding staircase to my old childhood bedroom, shutting the heavy door firmly behind me. The room was still painted the same pale blue my mother had insisted upon decades ago, a stifling reminder of the suffocating control she always demanded over every aspect of my existence. I did not throw myself onto the mattress to cry. I did not bury my face in a pillow to scream. My emotions were completely shut off, replaced by a cold, calculating precision that had made me one of the top producing luxury real estate directors in the entire state of Georgia. I walked over to the small vintage desk in the corner, flipped open my work laptop, and immediately connected to my secure personal hotspot. DeAndre had always possessed a profound obsession with projecting an image of unlimited generational wealth, but I knew his actual financial reality was constructed entirely out of smoke mirrors and desperately maxed out credit limits. He ran his political campaigns on empty promises and leveraged other people to foot the bill for his lavish lifestyle choices. Because I understood exactly how his deceptive mind operated, my intuition screamed at me to perform a comprehensive sweep of my own financial safeguards. I opened my secure web browser and logged directly into my premium credit monitoring application. I paid for top-tier identity protection services specifically because my family had a notorious history of blurring the lines between personal boundaries and financial entitlement. I needed to ensure that my personal assets and my pristine corporate credit profile were completely insulated from whatever impending implosion was bound to result from their Aspen ski resort fiasco. The loading screen spun for a few seconds before my comprehensive financial dashboard materialized on the glowing monitor. At first glance, my primary checking accounts and standard credit lines appeared perfectly normal, untouched, and secure. However, my eyes immediately locked onto a subtle red notification banner hovering in the corner of the screen, flagging a recent hard inquiry on my corporate credit profile. I clicked the alert, my heart maintaining a steady, unbothered rhythm. The inquiry had been initiated 48 hours ago by an exclusive luxury hospitality management group based in Colorado. The exact same hospitality group that managed the Aspen Resort, where DeAndre was hosting his extravagant New Year Eve political fundraiser. I leaned closer to the screen, my eyes narrowing as I scrutinized the digital paper trail. My brother-in-law had always been exceptionally bold, but this specific notification indicated a level of brazen criminality that exceeded even my worst expectations of him. I needed absolute confirmation before I made my next move. I quickly pulled up my secondary financial dashboard, diving deep into the intricate details of the unauthorized hard credit pull. The data revealed a deeply disturbing truth that went far beyond a simple background check. DeAndre had not just inquired about my credit score, he had actively weaponized my financial identity to fund his political ambitions. I immediately grabbed my cell phone and dialed the direct contact number for the Aspen Resort Billing Department. I bypassed the standard reservation desk and navigated my way to the corporate events coordinator. I spoke in a crisp, authoritative tone, identifying myself as the primary financial officer for the DeAndre political campaign. I informed the coordinator that I was conducting a routine year-end audit and needed an immediate digital copy of the Grand Ballroom event contract sent to my private email address. The coordinator, eager to please a supposedly wealthy client, sent the document over within 2 minutes. I opened the file and my blood ran completely cold. There, printed in stark black and white, was a legally binding event contract for the resort Grand Ballroom and 15 luxury suites. The total cost of the reservation was an astronomical figure. The initial holding fee had been paid, but the final remaining balance was a staggering $30,000 due exactly on December 31st. I scrolled rapidly down to the guarantor section of the legally binding document. DeAndre had not just used his own name. He had explicitly listed my full legal name, my highly protected social security number, and my pristine corporate credit profile as the primary financial guarantor for the entire extravagant event. To make matters infinitely worse, he had meticulously forged my physical signature on the bottom line of the contract. He had committed textbook identity theft and felony fraud without a single ounce of hesitation. I knew his political donors were incredibly fickle, and if they decided not to show up, or if they refused to open their checkbooks to cover the exorbitant costs, I would be held legally and financially responsible for the massive $30,000 bill. DeAndre had deliberately positioned me to absorb the catastrophic financial impact of his grandiose political aspirations. He essentially viewed my hard-earned stability as a disposable safety net for his reckless vanity. My family was not merely planning to use me as an unpaid nanny to scrub dirty diapers and chase screaming toddlers in the freezing snow. They were actively scheming to force me into subsidizing their fraudulent upper-class lifestyle while I remained banished out of sight. I stared at his fake rendition of my signature on the glowing screen. A dark, profound anger washed slowly over my entire body. They had officially crossed the bold line from toxic emotional manipulation into blatant criminal exploitation. My sister Tiara had married a desperate con artist, and my parents were proudly enabling his destructive behavior because it served their religious and political posturing. The absolute audacity to steal my identity, while actively mocking my single childless status at the dinner table, was a level of disrespect I could not ignore. I was not ever going to cry or throw a dramatic tantrum. I was going to systematically dismantle their entire operation and watch them burn to ashes. I smiled slightly while staring closely at the forged digital document right on my screen. I picked up my phone again and dialed the elite executive support line for my primary banking institution. I entered my secure PIN code and was immediately connected to a senior fraud prevention specialist. I carefully modulated my voice, ensuring I sounded completely calm and intensely rational. I explained that my credit profile had recently been compromised and requested that we implement highly specialized security protocols across all my active accounts. The specialist immediately offered to cancel my current cards and issue new ones expedited overnight. I sharply declined that specific offer. I knew that if I canceled the card outright, the Aspen Resort billing department would automatically notify DeAndre that his payment method was invalid right now. That would give him 3 entire days to scramble panic and somehow find a desperate backup plan to save his precious political gala. I absolutely refused to grant him the luxury of time. I wanted him to fly all the way to Colorado, smile in the faces of his wealthy church donors, put on his rented tuxedo, and experience the devastating shock of public financial ruin. I instructed the banking specialist to place a very specific targeted security freeze on the account. I requested that the card remain completely active for normal daily purchases, preventing any premature warning flags from triggering. However, I ordered the bank to instantly decline any transaction exceeding $500, particularly from any vendor categorized under luxury hospitality or resort management. I mandated that any charge matching that specific criteria must require my direct verbal authorization over the phone before processing. The fraud specialist confirmed the strict security parameters and applied the targeted freeze to my corporate profile. I thanked him politely and ended the call, setting my phone down on the smooth wooden desk. I leaned back in my vintage chair, staring up at the pale blue ceiling of my childhood bedroom. A genuine wide smile spread across my face, reaching all the way to my eyes. The trap was now flawlessly set and completely invisible. DeAndre was going to strut into that luxury ski resort on the afternoon of New Year Eve, exuding the arrogant confidence of a man who thought he had successfully outsmarted everyone. He was going to stand at that polished marble front desk, surrounded by his elite political donors, and attempt to casually swipe a card that was legally bound to trigger a catastrophic decline. I pictured the exact look of absolute horror that would wash over his smug face when the concierge loudly informed him that his primary guarantor card was frozen due to a severe fraud alert. He was enthusiastically marching his entire political career and my parents' flawless religious reputation straight into a brutal financial slaughterhouse. I softly closed my laptop, sliding it securely into my designer travel bag. I had successfully neutralized his criminal attack without uttering a single word of complaint to my family. The war had officially begun, and I already held the winning checkmate. Christmas morning arrived with an obnoxious level of performative cheer, perfectly curated for social media aesthetics. The towering 12-foot pine tree in the great room was suffocating under gold ribbons and oversized ornaments. I descended the winding staircase wearing a perfectly tailored silk lounge set, masking my inner anticipation behind a placid, calm expression. My family was already gathered around the massive marble fireplace, snapping dozens of photos for my father, church newsletter mother. Brenda held court in the center of the room, draped in a vibrant emerald green velvet robe that she had undoubtedly charged to one of DeAndre's rapidly expiring credit accounts. When she spotted me walking into the room, her bright camera-ready smile faltered for a fraction of a second before twisting into a tight, calculating grin. She beckoned me over, holding out a hastily wrapped rectangular box wrapped in generic holiday paper. "Simone, darling," she cooed loudly, ensuring the room could hear her maternal affection. "I wanted to make sure you had something special to open first." This morning I accepted the box and carefully peeled back the shiny paper, revealing a dull gray, scratchy wool sweater that looked like it had been plucked directly from a discount clearance bin. It was coarse, stiff, and entirely unflattering, a stark contrast to the luxurious cashmere garments currently draped across the laps of Vanessa and Tiara. I ran my manicured fingers over the cheap, abrasive fabric, fully understanding the malicious subtext behind the gesture. "Make sure you pack that specific sweater and wear comfortable clothes on New Year Eve. Simone." My mother instructed, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that made my skin crawl. "We are going to have a very cozy, quiet family night in Aspen while the guests mingle in the main ballroom. You will want to be dressed for comfort, since you will be spending the entire evening relaxing indoors." Relaxing indoors was her thinly veiled code for wrangling 20 screaming toddlers while scrubbing baby vomit off a rented cabin floor. She was attempting to dress me for the part of the unpaid family servant, handing me my designated uniform, with a condescending smile. I did not flinch or show a single ounce of indignation. Instead, I looked her directly in the eyes, smiled warmly, and pulled the itchy gray garment to my chest. "Thank you so much, Mother," I replied, my voice dripping with saccharine gratitude. "It is exactly what I need for how I plan to spend my New Year Eve. I promise I will make sure my evening is incredibly memorable." She patted my cheek, completely oblivious to the double meaning behind my words. She turned her attention back to the mountain of expensive boxes, satisfied that she had successfully secured her free childcare for the upcoming political gala. I folded the hideous sweater, placed it gently back into its cardboard box, and walked over to a quiet armchair near the bay window. The game of deception was functioning flawlessly. The living room quickly devolved into a chaotic spectacle of unbridled materialism and financial delusion. I sat silently in my armchair, sipping a mug of dark roast coffee while watching my family tear into mountains of designer packaging. Tiara shrieked dramatically as she unveiled a diamond tennis bracelet that DeAndre had clearly purchased using borrowed funds. Vanessa paraded around the room, modeling a pair of red bottom heels, while Jamal puffed his chest out, performing the role of a wealthy provider, despite his crippling vehicular debt. Pastor Calvin and Mother Brenda exchanged matching Rolex watches, praising the Lord for his endless financial blessings, while conveniently ignoring the fraudulent credit lines keeping their entire empire afloat. They were so utterly consumed by their own superficial reflections that they paid absolutely no attention to the quiet woman sitting in the corner typing methodically on her sleek silver iPad. I lowered the brightness on my screen and opened an encrypted browser. If they were planning a luxurious getaway to the snowy mountains of Colorado, built on a foundation of my stolen identity, I was going to plan an equally lavish escape built on my own actual wealth. I navigated to the booking portal for an exclusive adults-only 5-star eco-resort, nestled deep in the lush tropical rainforests of Costa Rica. I bypassed standard rooms and selected a private oceanfront villa featuring a personal infinity pool, a dedicated butler service, and a secluded stretch of pristine white sand beach. I requested a premium spa package, a sunset catamaran, cruise, and a private chef tasting menu specifically reserved for New Year Eve. The total price tag for the excursion was astronomical, a figure that would make my status-obsessed parents hesitate. I pulled my heavy black titanium credit card from my wallet and typed the numbers into the checkout page. There was no hesitation, no anxious transferring of funds, and no desperate need for a fraudulent guarantor. I clicked the Confirm Purchase button and watched as the transaction processed instantaneously. The screen flashed a brilliant green confirmation checkmark, followed by a cheerful message, welcoming me to paradise. I had paid for the entire luxury vacation in full, using liquid cash from my own legitimate business earnings. I received the boarding pass for my direct first-class flight and saved it securely to my digital wallet. I sat back and took another slow sip of my coffee, watching Tiara force her uncooperative toddlers into matching designer outfits for another staged holiday photo. The contrast between their chaotic, credit-fueled existence and my peaceful, debt-free reality was intoxicating. They were currently celebrating a fake victory, preparing to fly to a freezing mountain resort where a catastrophic financial explosion was waiting to destroy their reputations. Meanwhile, I was quietly securing my tropical sanctuary, where the only ice I would encounter would be clinking softly inside a tall crystal glass filled with premium liquor. I locked my iPad screen, sliding it back into my leather tote bag, and allowed myself a genuine relaxed sigh of profound relief. My moment of tropical anticipation was interrupted by the scent of designer cologne. I looked up to see my older brother Jamal, leaning against the wall beside my armchair, blocking my exit. He held a glass of bourbon in one hand, jingling his keys in the other, trying to project masculine dominance. I knew instantly what he wanted. His earlier performance presenting those red-bottom shoes to Vanessa had drained whatever meager cash reserves he had left in his checking account. "Hey, little sister," Jamal began, his voice dropping into a smooth, practiced hustle. "It is beautiful, seeing the family together, celebrating the blessings of the Lord." I kept my face blank, refusing to offer verbal encouragement. I slid my right hand into the pocket of my lounge pants, locating my smartphone and blindly tapping the side button to activate the voice recording shortcut. I needed every detail of this impending shakedown documented for the trap I was building. Yeah, well, Jamal continued, clearing his throat when I refused to engage. The church teaches us that siblings need to uplift each other. We are a team. Simone, and sometimes a team player has to step up to support the legacy. I am looking at a temporary cash flow issue right now, and I need you to float me another loan just to handle some maintenance on the Mercedes. I stared directly into his panicked eyes, letting the silence stretch uncomfortably. Maintenance? I asked, my tone flat. Last month you needed $2,000 for an emergency engine repair. What exactly is the issue this time, Jamal? He shifted nervously, glancing over his shoulder to ensure his pageant queen wife was out of earshot. It is not exactly a repair, he muttered, his arrogant facade cracking under the pressure of his own failures. The financing company is threatening to accelerate my loan. I have not paid the car note in 4 months. Simone, 4 entire months. If they repossess that car, Vanessa will leave me and the congregation will talk. You have the money, you sit in that penthouse hoarding cash. It is your Christian duty to help your brother keep his family together. I felt a cold thrill of triumph wash over my body. I had just captured his explicit verbal admission of a 4-month delinquency on a digital audio file. He handed me the exact actionable intelligence I needed to execute the next phase of my retaliation. I did not raise my voice or show any outward disgust at his pathetic manipulation. I simply offered him a tight smile. I will certainly look into what I can do for you, Jamal, I replied smoothly, standing up and brushing past his frozen frame. Enjoy your Christmas blessings. I walked out of the room with my phone securely in my pocket, leaving him standing there oblivious to the fact that he had just handed me the keys to his public destruction. I retreated to the bathroom, locking the solid door to ensure absolute privacy. My mind raced with the implications of Jamal's arrogant confession. He was 4 months behind on a luxury vehicle lease, yet parading around acting like a self-made millionaire. I leaned against the counter, pulling my smartphone from my pocket and opening an encrypted web browser. I needed to verify the legal status of his Mercedes-Benz before orchestrating its complete public demise. A sudden memory surfaced, cutting through the loud holiday noise. 2 years ago, when Jamal tried securing financing for that vehicle, his credit score was in absolute ruins due to massive gambling debts. He had begged our parents for financial help. They convinced me to let him use my previous condo address to establish legal residency in a wealthier zip code, making his application look marginally better on paper. It was a loophole I regretted facilitating, but today it would serve as my ultimate weapon. I navigated directly to the Fulton County Public Records database, entering his full legal name and my old residential address. The search engine spun for a few tense seconds before displaying a comprehensive list of active civil judgments and financial liens. There it was, highlighted in glaring red text. A formal writ of replevin had been legally filed by the primary automotive financing institution exactly 2 weeks ago. The bank was not just issuing empty threats to him, they had officially initiated the aggressive legal process to violently reclaim their stolen property. I downloaded the digital court documents, scanning the dense legal jargon with practiced corporate efficiency. The paperwork confirmed that an active recovery order had been issued to a massive national asset retrieval agency. The financing company had officially classified the vehicle as a high-risk flight asset, granting the repossession agents full legal authority to seize the Mercedes-Benz from any public or private location without requiring any prior notification whatsoever. I smiled, staring at the glowing screen. My golden child brother really thought he could hide his financial ruin behind tailored suits and loud church sermons while secretly drowning in default. The bank desperately wanted their expensive car back, and I was going to serve it to them on a silver platter. I quickly cross-referenced the court filing with the national database to identify the specific third-party asset recovery firm assigned to execute the repossession. It was a ruthless, notoriously aggressive agency, known for operating across state lines, including the freezing, snowy mountains of Colorado. The pieces of my retaliation puzzle were aligning with terrifying perfection. Jamal thought he could demand a quick cash bailout from me using religious guilt as leverage. Instead, he had just handed me the exact coordinates to demolish his carefully crafted image. I memorized the contact information for the recovery agency, taking a slow, deep breath to steady my adrenaline. The setup was flawlessly confirmed, and now it was time to make a very important, highly immediate phone call. I dialed the dispatch number for the asset recovery firm, keeping my voice low and devoid of emotion. A gruff dispatcher named Mike answered, barking his name over the background noise of ringing phones and radio static. I did not waste a second on pleasantries. I identified myself as a third-party informant, possessing actionable intelligence regarding a high-value flight asset slated for recovery. I recited the exact vehicle identification number, license plate, and civil action file number. Mike's tone shifted to highly attentive, clicking his keyboard as he pulled up the delinquent profile. "You have my attention," he grunted into the receiver. I informed him that the debtor Jamal was planning to transport the targeted vehicle across state lines to evade local jurisdiction. I provided the exact make, model, and blacked-out trim package of the Mercedes-Benz, ensuring no mistaken identity when field agents arrived. Mike confirmed the details, noting Jamal had been dodging local tow trucks by hiding the car in closed garages across Atlanta. "I am calling to give you the precise coordinates of where this vehicle will be parked, completely unprotected." I stated my words crisp and precise. The debtor is driving the vehicle to a luxury ski resort in Aspen, Colorado, for a New Year Eve political fundraiser. He intends to arrive on December 31st and will utilize the VIP valet service because he lacks funds to secure a private garage. I transmitted the exact physical address of the Aspen resort directly to their dispatch email system. I explained that the VIP valet section was an open-air circular driveway located directly in front of the grand ballroom entrance, meaning the car would be parked on accessible commercial property, negating the need for any complex residential warrants. The vehicle will be handed over to the valet attendants, making it a sitting duck for a quick hook and tow operation. I continued establishing the logistical ease of the seizure. Your agency operates a high-altitude recovery branch out of Denver, so Aspen is well within your operational radius. Mike let out a low, appreciative whistle, clearly impressed by the meticulous level of actionable data I was providing. "This is the kind of intelligence we usually spend weeks digging for," he admitted, sounding genuinely eager to close the open file. "We have agents stationed in that specific mountain sector handling luxury defaults all season long." I smiled, gripping the edge of the sink as the trap locked firmly into place. Jamal was going to drive his unpaid luxury vehicle right up to the glittering front doors of the most exclusive resort in town, tossing the keys to a valet while trying to look like a millionaire. He had absolutely no idea that I had transformed that prestigious valet stand into a giant target for a ruthless asset recovery team. The geography and the legal parameters were flawless. Now I simply needed to ensure the timing of the execution would cause the maximum psychological damage. I needed this to be a spectacular public execution of his fragile ego, not just a quiet toe. I leaned closer to the phone, my voice hardening. "Listen to me carefully, Mike," I said, establishing absolute control over the transaction. The target will be attending a highly publicized gala inside the grand ballroom. The event is being covered by local media and attended by major donors from Atlanta. The debtor will be wearing a custom tuxedo, acting as the guest of honor. It is imperative that this vehicle is not seized while he is asleep in his room. I want maximum visibility. I proposed a specific, highly lucrative arrangement. I offered to wire a $2,000 finder's fee directly to the assigned field agent personal account as an untraceable cash tip. However, this bounty came with one strict, non-negotiable condition. The tow truck could not arrive early in the afternoon and could not arrive late after the guests had dispersed. The recovery vehicle must pull into that brightly lit VIP circular driveway at exactly 9 o'clock at night Standard Mountain Time. I explained that 9 o'clock was the exact moment the political keynote speech was scheduled to conclude, meaning the floor-to-ceiling glass windows of the grand ballroom would be packed with wealthy donors looking outward toward the snowy driveway. The tow truck needs its yellow emergency strobe lights flashing at maximum brightness, illuminating the entire front of the resort. I instructed, I want the heavy-duty chains clanking, and I want the agent to make a disruptive scene if the valet tries to intervene. The car goes on the flatbed right in front of the glass windows at exactly 9. I transferred the $2,000 bounty to their holding account, providing the transaction receipt number as proof of my seriousness. Mike chuckled, a dark sound confirming we were in perfect alignment. You got a deal, he promised. My best mountain agent will be idling, waiting for the clock to strike 9. We love making a grand entrance at these fancy rich folk parties. I thanked him, ended the call, and deleted the record from my device. The trap for the golden boy was set, armed and ticking. Jamal had spent his entire life stealing from me, mocking my independence and hiding his failures behind our parents' religious shield. On New Year Eve, he was going to stand in a room full of elite mega-church donors and city council members, sipping champagne while pretending to be royalty. Then he would be forced to watch through a glass window as a massive tow truck publicly stripped him of his most prized possession, humiliating his wife Vanessa and destroying the family's social standing beyond repair. I unlocked the bathroom door, stepping out into the chaotic holiday hallway. My face was a mask of serene, perfect composure. I had just purchased a front-row ticket to their absolute ruin, and it was worth every single penny. I left my childhood home shortly after the chaotic gift exchange, wrapping my designer coat tightly around myself to block the biting winter wind. Returning to the absolute silence of my own luxury penthouse on the evening of December 28th felt like crossing the border into a safe sanctuary. There were no fake smiles here, no demanding siblings, and no parents looking at me as if I were a walking automated teller machine. I changed into a soft silk robe and walked straight to my home office. The sleek glass desk was cold against my fingertips as I opened my laptop to begin my work. It was time to construct the digital explosive device that would obliterate DeAndre and his political aspirations permanently. I connected my smartphone to the computer and pulled up the hidden audio file I had recorded outside my father's mahogany study. I put on my noise-canceling headphones and pressed play. The pristine audio quality captured every single wicked syllable with terrifying clarity. I listened to my brother-in-law's arrogant voice echoing through my speakers. I heard him explicitly call his most loyal political donors stupid rich snobs whose annoying kids I am going to dump on my sister to save a buck. I heard him mock their extravagant lifestyles while simultaneously plotting to steal their campaign contributions to fund his vanity projects. I heard my mother cackling in the background, validating his ruthless exploitation of my time and their money. I opened a blank email draft and began to construct my message. I did not want to sound bitter or emotional because angry women are too easily dismissed in our society. Instead, I adopted the cold clinical tone of a concerned whistleblower. I typed a brief, highly professional subject line declaring an urgent ethics disclosure regarding the upcoming Aspen political fundraiser. In the body of the email, I kept the text intentionally sparse. I stated that the attached audio file was being provided anonymously to ensure complete transparency regarding the fraudulent allocation of campaign funds and the deliberate deception regarding the promised luxury childcare services. I did not type out a long manifesto detailing my personal grievances or my family toxic history. The recording itself was a masterpiece of self-destruction that required absolutely no additional commentary from me. DeAndre had dug his own grave using his own arrogant vocal cords. All I had to do was attach the high-definition audio file to the draft and ensure it landed in the right inboxes. I watched the progress bar inch across the screen as the file successfully uploaded to the server. The digital weapon was now fully armed and sitting quietly in my outbox, awaiting its target coordinates. I double-checked the audio format to ensure it would play seamlessly on any mobile device without requiring special software downloads. I wanted these wealthy donors to hear the crystal clear disrespect the very second they tapped the play button. The venom in DeAndre's voice was going to be the absolute last thing they heard before pulling their massive political endorsements. Now came the most critical phase of the operation, which involved compiling the ultimate recipient list. DeAndre made a catastrophic tactical error 2 years ago when he launched his very first local campaign. He was too cheap to hire a professional data manager, so he begged me to organize his initial donor database. Because I am a meticulous luxury real estate director, I built him a flawless digital spreadsheet containing the direct contact information for every major political and social power player in the greater Atlanta area. He eventually locked me out of the system when his ego inflated, but he completely forgot that I possessed a mirrored backup drive containing the master contact list. I opened the encrypted drive and began extracting the email addresses of the exact 15 elite couples who were scheduled to attend the Aspen Winter Retreat. I did not stop there. If I was going to burn his political kingdom to the ground, I needed to ensure the fire spread to every single corner of his social universe. I methodically added the private email addresses of every senior elder sitting on the executive board of our mega church. These were the highly influential religious leaders who funded my father ministry and publicly backed DeAndre's campaign. Hearing their trusted pastor happily conspire to defraud them would shatter the holy illusion my parents had maintained for decades. Next, I targeted the Divine Nine community. My sister Tiara heavily leveraged her sorority connections to secure wealthy donors, while DeAndre constantly flaunted his fraternity ties to gain political favor. I copy and pasted the addresses of the most prominent regional directors and alumni chapter presidents. These were proud, highly educated individuals who commanded immense respect and wielded massive financial power across the state. They absolutely despised being made fools of, especially by someone claiming to represent their prestigious organizations. I reviewed the growing list of recipients, staring at the names of judges, business moguls, and local celebrities. I made sure to include the wives of the political donors, knowing that the mothers would be infinitely more enraged upon discovering that their precious children were viewed as annoying burdens by the very man they were paying to host them. I meticulously checked every single email address for typos, ensuring not a single message would bounce back. I wanted a 100% delivery rate. I grouped the recipients by their social status, adding them to the blind carbon copy field to protect their privacy while maximizing the collective shock value. They were all going to receive the exact same audio file at the exact same moment. The sheer volume of elite individuals on this list guaranteed that DeAndre could never spin the narrative or silence the fallout. I was about to be canceled by the most powerful network of upper-class citizens in the entire city, and there was no public relations crisis team on Earth capable of saving him from the wrath of a betrayed community. With the email drafted and the devastating recipient list perfectly compiled, I moved to the final execution phase, setting the digital timer. The timing of the detonation was just as crucial as the explosive audio itself. I could not simply hit send right now while they were still in Atlanta. If I warned them prematurely, they would cancel the trip, concoct a massive lie to cover their tracks, and find a way to shift the blame onto someone else. I needed them trapped on that mountain, surrounded by the very people they were currently scamming. I clicked on the scheduling options within my email client. A small calendar window popped up on my screen. I selected December 31st. Then I scrolled down to the precise time mechanism. I wanted the audio file to hit their smartphones at the exact moment the towing company was scheduled to drag Jamal's unpaid luxury vehicle away from the resort valet stand. I set the automated delivery time for exactly 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This synchronized timeline meant that while DeAndre was standing in the grand ballroom delivering his arrogant keynote speech about family values, his donors would be staring down at their phones, listening to his actual sinister voice. Simultaneously, Jamal would be running out into the freezing snow to watch his fraudulent lifestyle get repossessed right in front of the floor-to-ceiling glass windows. It was a masterclass in psychological warfare and synchronized public humiliation. I verified the scheduled time zone, matching it perfectly with the mountain time of the Aspen resort. I double-checked the network connection to ensure my server would dispatch the message without any technical delays. Everything was green lit and locked in. I moved my cursor over the schedule send button. I did not hesitate or feel a single shred of familial guilt. I clicked the button and watched the email vanish into the scheduled outbox folder. The digital timer had officially started ticking down to their absolute destruction. I slowly lowered the lid of my laptop, shutting it with a soft but definitive click. The harsh blue light of the screen disappeared, leaving my office bathed in the warm, ambient glow of my expensive desk lamp. I stood up, stretching my arms above my head, feeling an immense physical weight lift off my shoulders. I walked out to my spacious modern kitchen and opened my custom wine fridge. I reached past the standard bottles and pulled out a vintage Cabernet Sauvignon that I had been saving for a truly special occasion. I poured a generous amount of the dark ruby liquid into a large crystal glass. I walked over to my floor-to-ceiling penthouse windows, looking out over the glittering Atlanta skyline. I took a slow, luxurious sip of the expensive wine, savoring the rich, complex flavors on my tongue. I had successfully orchestrated a multifaceted retaliation that would permanently dismantle their toxic control over my life. The board was perfectly set, the traps were actively armed, and I was officially ready to leave the country. The sun rose over the Atlanta skyline on December 30th, painting the city in vibrant shades of gold and crisp winter blue. I was already awake and meticulously packing my designer luggage when the concierge buzzer echoed through my penthouse. The front desk informed me that my sister Tiara was waiting in the lobby and demanding immediate entry. I authorized her access, smoothing my silk robe and arranging my face into the submissive expression they all expected to see. A few moments later, Tiara burst through my front door without bothering to knock. She was dragging 5 massive, heavy shopping bags, completely overstuffed with premium diapers, specialized organic baby formula, and an absurd assortment of noisy plastic toys. She looked frantic, her expensive lace front wig slightly askew, and her eyes wide with the manic energy of a woman desperately trying to hold together a failing facade. She dumped the heavy bags directly onto my pristine hardwood floor, letting out an exaggerated sigh of profound exhaustion. "Listen to me very carefully, Simone," she commanded, jabbing a manicured finger in my direction. "DeAndre and I have a dozen last-minute political meetings today, so you need to handle all of this. The VIP guests are extremely particular about their children. Make sure the baby formula is warmed to exactly 98 degrees. Do not just guess the temperature either, because Councilman Davis' wife will absolutely throw a fit if her toddler gets a stomachache. Do not mess this up, Simone. We are counting on you completely." I stood there quietly looking at the towering pile of childcare supplies that were supposed to consume my entire New Year Eve. I did not argue or remind her that I was a high-level corporate executive who did not take aggressive orders regarding baby formula. Instead, I offered her a meek, obedient nod. "You do not need to worry about a single thing, Tiara," I replied, my voice dripping with false sincerity. "I have everything completely under control." She scoffed, rolling her eyes as she adjusted her expensive designer handbag. "You better," she snapped, turning sharply on her heel. "We are trusting you not to embarrass the family tomorrow." Tiara slammed the front door shut, leaving me alone with the mountain of baby supplies. I walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window and watched her climb into her leased luxury vehicle, speeding away toward her inevitable doom. The moment her taillights disappeared from view, my obedient demeanor vanished entirely. I grabbed the handles of the heavy plastic bags, dragging them out the front door and straight down the polished hallway toward the trash room. I lifted the lid of the massive industrial garbage chute and shoved every single package of diapers, formula, and toys right down the dark metal shaft. I listened to the highly satisfying thud as the supplies hit the bottom of the dumpster far below. My unpaid babysitting duties were officially terminated, and my holiday could finally begin today. 2 hours later, I walked through the sliding glass doors of the exclusive Delta Sky Club at the Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. The serene atmosphere of the premium lounge was a welcome contrast to the stressful energy I had left behind in the city. Soft jazz music played quietly over the hidden speakers, and the scent of fresh espresso filled the air. I found a secluded leather armchair near the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the busy tarmac. A polite attendant approached and handed me a tall crystal flute filled with chilled vintage champagne. I took a slow, appreciative sip, letting the crisp bubbles dance across my tongue as I watched the commercial jets take off into the winter sky. I was completely at peace, but the smartphone resting on the glass table beside me was aggressively vibrating without pause. My family was operating in a state of absolute frenzy, and their collective panic was currently blowing up our shared group chat. I picked up the device and unlocked the screen, watching the frantic messages pour in one after another. Jamal was furiously complaining that Vanessa had packed too many heavy suitcases and demanded to know who was paying for their oversized baggage fees. Tiara was typing in all capital letters, screaming at DeAndre because his political donor list had unexpectedly expanded and she was stressed about seating arrangements. They were all bickering, tearing each other down, and spiraling over the logistics of a luxury vacation they were entirely unqualified to host and completely unable to afford. I scrolled through the toxic digital chaos, feeling absolutely no obligation to intervene or offer my usual financial assistance. Then a direct notification popped up, cutting through the group chat clutter. It was a private text message from First Lady Brenda. Simone, she wrote, her digital tone, just as commanding and dismissive as her spoken voice. Make sure you get to the secondary cabin by 3:00 p.m. tomorrow afternoon. The VIP guests will start dropping off their children early so the adults can attend the welcome reception. I need you to completely clean and sanitize the cabin before they arrive. The floors must be spotless and the baby toys need to be properly organized. Do not be late and do not embarrass this family. I stared at her audacious message, taking another long, luxurious sip of my expensive champagne. My mother truly believed I was driving my car up to the snowy mountains of Colorado to serve as a glorified janitor, an unpaid nanny for her wealthy church donors. She felt absolutely entitled to my free labor, never once considering that I might have a career or personal boundaries. I set my glass down and placed my fingers over the digital keyboard. I did not type out an angry paragraph defending my worth. I did not threaten to expose their massive, impending financial disaster. I kept my response incredibly brief and completely devoid of any emotional attachment. Understood, I replied, tapping the send button with a firm, satisfying click. The final boarding announcement for my international flight chimed softly through the premium lounge speakers, interrupting my thoughts. I gathered my designer tote bag and walked gracefully toward the departure gate, leaving the stress of Atlanta far behind me. The flight attendant greeted me warmly at the door, ushering me directly into the luxurious first-class cabin. I settled into my spacious reclining suite, accepting a warm scented towel and another fresh glass of premium champagne. I pulled my smartphone from my pocket one final time to check the status of my meticulously laid traps. The automated email containing DeAndre damning audio recording was securely locked and loaded in the scheduled outbox, waiting to detonate at 9:00 tomorrow evening. The targeted fraud alert on my corporate credit profile remained fully active, acting as an invisible, impenetrable wall between my hard-earned wealth and their impending bankruptcy. The repossession agency confirmed that their mountain recovery agent was already staged in Aspen, eagerly awaiting his precise moment to strike. Everything was flawlessly positioned. I swiped down on my screen and activated airplane mode, severing all digital ties to my toxic relatives. As the massive commercial jet pushed back from the gate and began its smooth, powerful ascent into the winter sky, I closed my eyes and allowed myself to envision the absolute nightmare unfolding back on the ground. While I was reclining in a leather seat being served a gourmet chef-prepared meal, my family was likely sweating through their designer clothes, trying to cram entirely too much oversized luggage into the back of a rented airport shuttle van. I pictured DeAndre nervously biting his nails, terrified that his wealthy political donors would discover he lacked the actual capital to fund his own extravagant campaign promises. I imagined Tiara aggressively yelling at her poorly behaved children, completely oblivious to the fact that her designated free babysitter was currently flying thousands of miles in the opposite direction. I pictured Pastor Calvin and Mother Brenda sitting rigidly in their economy airline seats, desperately trying to project an aura of divine prosperity, while internally panicking about the massive credit card debt they were accumulating just to keep up appearances. They were all flying directly into a perfectly constructed financial and social ambush, completely blinded by their own relentless arrogance and entitlement. They truly believed they could continuously exploit my independence, drain my bank accounts, and dismiss my humanity without ever facing a single consequence. They thought my silence at the dinner table was a sign of weakness and submission. They were about to learn the hardest lesson of their entire lives. You never provoke the person who handles the logistics, and you absolutely never underestimate a woman who has nothing left to lose. I adjusted my cashmere blanket, reclined my seat all the way back into a flat bed, and closed my eyes with a serene, genuine smile. My great escape was officially underway, and their total destruction was finally guaranteed. The tropical heat of Costa Rica wrapped around me like a warm embrace the moment I stepped off the plane. I bypassed the crowded luggage carousels with my single designer carry-on bag and walked straight toward the private resort shuttle waiting for me at the curb. Once I was comfortably seated in the back of the air-conditioned luxury SUV with a chilled bottle of sparkling water in my hand, I finally disabled airplane mode on my smartphone. The device immediately seized up, freezing for several seconds as it attempted to process a massive influx of frantic digital communication. My notification screen looked like a glowing red mosaic of pure panic. There were 42 missed calls, 17 text messages, and 8 urgent voicemails, all time-stamped between 1 o'clock and 2:30 in the afternoon. My family had officially arrived in Aspen. I leaned my head against the soft leather headrest and tapped the play button on the first voicemail, letting the spectacular auditory theater wash over me. The first message was from DeAndre, time-stamped at exactly 1:45. Background noise filtered through the speaker, capturing the crackling of a massive stone fireplace and the muffled, elegant chatter of a high-end ski lodge. "Simone, pick up your phone right now." DeAndre barked, his voice tight with that fake authoritative bravado he always used around wealthy people. "We just walked into the grand lobby, and I do not see you anywhere. You were supposed to be here an hour ago to grab the luggage carts. The city council members are arriving in 10 minutes, and I need you down at the secondary cabin to start receiving their children immediately. Do not make me come looking for you." The second voicemail arrived 5 minutes later from my mother, Brenda. She sounded breathless and intensely irritated. "Simone, where on earth are you?" she hissed, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "The bellhops at this resort are moving far too slowly, and my custom ski boots are getting ruined in this slush. I need you to come out to the circular driveway and carry these garment bags up to the presidential suite. Your father is busy networking with the church elders, and Tiara is dealing with her screaming toddlers. Stop being so incredibly selfish and get down here to do your job." I smiled, taking a slow sip of my sparkling water. They were standing in the middle of a winter wonderland, surrounded by political elites and millionaire church donors, oblivious to the fact that their designated unpaid servant was currently driving through a vibrant green rainforest thousands of miles away. They were barking aggressive orders into the void, entirely consumed by their own arrogance. But the tone of the voicemails was about to undergo a radical, dramatic shift. The timeline on my screen indicated a sudden cluster of back-to-back missed calls right around 2:15 in the afternoon. The third voicemail was from a completely unknown Colorado phone number. I tapped play, and the crisp, professional voice of a luxury hospitality manager filled the quiet interior of my private shuttle. "Good afternoon, Miss Simone," the polite voice stated. "This is the corporate billing director at the Aspen Luxury Resort. We are currently experiencing a highly concerning situation at our front desk regarding a Mr. DeAndre. He is attempting to secure the grand ballroom for a New Year Eve political gala, using your corporate credit profile as the primary financial guarantor. I am calling to inform you that our merchant system has declined the transaction and triggered a severe federal fraud alert, indicating identity theft. We require your immediate verbal authorization to override the security freeze, or we will be forced to cancel the entire event and ask Mr. DeAndre to vacate the premises. If you did not authorize this signature, please contact your banking institution immediately. Have a wonderful day." I let out a soft, genuine laugh. The invisible trap I had set had snapped shut with bone-crushing precision. The next voicemail was from DeAndre, and the arrogant swagger was completely gone from his voice. He sounded like a man who was actively suffocating. Simone, you need to call my cell phone the very second you get this message. He stammered, his breath coming in short, panicked bursts. I am standing at the registration desk and they are telling me your corporate card is locked. You need to call your bank and authorize a $30,000 charge right now. The donors are standing right behind me in the lobby, Simone. They are watching me. Tell the bank it was a mistake. Tell them you gave me permission to sign your name. Do it now, or my entire political campaign is dead. I could perfectly picture the humiliating scene unfolding at that polished marble reception desk. DeAndre stepping up to the concierge, handing over his own maxed-out credit card for the final massive ballroom fee, only to watch the machine flash a bright red decline notification. I could imagine his fake, easygoing laugh as he casually instructed the staff to simply run the wealthy guarantor card they had on file instead. He expected a smooth transaction. Instead, the concierge returned with a grim expression and informed him loud enough for the nearby mega-church elders to hear that he was actively attempting to commit felony credit card fraud using stolen credentials. The absolute public degradation of that specific moment was a masterpiece of karmic justice. DeAndre had spent months looking down his nose at me, treating my hard-earned financial stability as a disposable resource for his vanity. Now he was standing in a crowded lobby, wearing a tailored suit, sweating profusely, while wealthy political donors whispered behind his back. The facade of unlimited generational wealth he had worked so hard to project was shattering into a million irreparable pieces right in front of the exact people he was trying to impress. The resort management was demanding $30,000 in liquid capital immediately, or the entire New Year Eve gala, the venue, the catering, and the luxury suites would be canceled on the spot. The final voicemail in the queue was from my mother, Brenda, and it painted a vivid, horrifying picture of the absolute panic currently consuming my family. She had clearly locked herself inside a bathroom stall to leave the message, her voice echoing slightly against the tile walls. Simone, you have completely destroyed us, she sobbed, her words frantic and laced with pure terror. The hotel manager threatened to call the local authorities on DeAndre for identity theft. The city council members are asking questions about why we cannot afford the ballroom. Your father is out in the lobby having a literal panic attack. He is having to call his private banker on a holiday to liquidate the secret emergency church building fund just to keep the venue from throwing us out into the snow. Do you have any idea how illegal it is to wire church funds for a personal political party? You need to fix this right now. I leaned back against the leather seat of my tropical transport, watching the lush Costa Rican jungle roll past my window. The image of my domineering father, Pastor Calvin, frantically transferring restricted religious funds to cover his son-in-law fraudulent debts was poetic justice of the highest order. My father had spent my entire life preaching about moral superiority and financial blessings from the pulpit, while quietly judging my independent lifestyle. Now he was backed into a desperate corner, forced to commit severe financial misconduct, right in the middle of a crowded ski lodge, just to save his family from public embarrassment. How was liquidating the very church funds he was supposed to protect, all because they had arrogantly assumed I would silently absorb the catastrophic cost of their fake luxury lifestyle. They were sweating profusely, their expensive designer clothes feeling suddenly tight and suffocating as the reality of their situation clamped down around their throats. They had barely been at the resort for an hour, and their entire social standing was already hanging by a single frayed thread. The wealthy donors they were so desperate to impress had just watched the mighty pastor and the aspiring politicians scramble like broke, desperate scam artists at a hotel front desk. The initial shockwave of the declined credit card had successfully fractured their religious and political armor, but it was only the first phase of my retaliation. They had managed to scrape together the stolen church money to temporarily secure the grand ballroom, but they were still completely oblivious to the fact that their nightmare was just beginning. They still firmly believed I was simply running late, stuck in traffic, or lost on the mountain. They still expected me to eventually walk through those wooden lodge doors, ready to accept their verbal abuse and take over the babysitting duties for 20 screaming children. I deleted the voicemails from my phone one by one, erasing their desperate, panicked voices from my digital space. The financial ambush had been executed flawlessly. Now the clock was steadily ticking down toward the evening gala where the real devastation was waiting to tear their world apart. The sun dipped below the jagged Aspen mountain peaks, plunging the exclusive luxury resort into freezing twilight. It was exactly 6 o'clock in the evening on New Year Eve, and the grand lobby of the main lodge was rapidly transforming into a dazzling runway of extreme wealth and political posturing. The 15 elite couples who formed the backbone of DeAndre campaign funding began to emerge from their private suites, draped in tens of thousands of dollars of designer fashion. The women wore sweeping sequin gowns, heavy mink coats, and staggering diamond necklaces that caught the glow of the lobby chandeliers. The men sported custom-tailored tuxedos and flashed expensive imported timepieces. They expected nothing less than absolute flawless perfection to justify the massive campaign contributions they had written to my brother-in-law. Trailing closely behind these impeccably dressed elites was a chaotic, destructive tornado of 20 overly energetic and highly entitled children. The group ranged from screaming fussy toddlers to hyperactive preteens who were already complaining about the freezing mountain temperatures. These kids were completely hyped up on holiday sugar, thoroughly exhausted from the high-altitude travel, and completely lacking any basic discipline. Their parents, however, remained entirely unbothered by the escalating noise and misbehavior. They had been explicitly promised a 5-star luxury childcare experience. DeAndre had printed the guarantee directly on the glossy gold embossed invitation brochures. He promised them a private secondary cabin staffed by certified professional nannies, offering organic catered meals, organized winter crafts, and a serene, structured environment. The donors fully expected to drop their children off and spend the rest of the evening drinking top-shelf champagne and networking in the grand ballroom completely undisturbed. The wealthy couples gathered their whining children and began strutting across the snow-covered courtyard toward the designated secondary cabin. The freezing mountain wind whipped aggressively at their designer dresses and perfectly styled hair, but they laughed it off, eager to quickly deposit their offspring and start the evening festivities. They carried oversized designer diaper bags, specialized organic snack containers, and fussy crying babies wrapped tightly in expensive cashmere blankets. They fully expected to open the heavy wooden door of the secondary cabin and be greeted by a highly trained team of smiling uniformed childcare professionals, ready to immediately whisk their burdens away. They anticipated stepping into a warm, welcoming space, smelling of fresh hot chocolate and featuring cheerful holiday music playing softly over a state-of-the-art sound system. They expected premium service because that was exactly what they had paid for. The group marched right up to the heavy oak door of the secondary cabin, eager to be free of their parental duties for the night. Councilman Davis, leading the pack with his twin toddlers screaming loudly, stepped forward and confidently pulled the iron handle. The heavy oak door swung open to reveal an absolute suffocating void. Councilman Davis stepped over the threshold and immediately froze in his tracks. There was no warm blast of central heating to welcome them. The air inside the secondary cabin was bitterly cold, exactly matching the freezing temperature of the snowy courtyard outside. There were no cheerful holiday decorations illuminating the room. There were no tables set up with organic catered meals or engaging winter crafts. There were no soft blankets or neatly organized play areas. Most importantly, there was absolutely no sign of me. The massive rustic room was completely dark, desolate, and entirely abandoned. The only sound greeting the 15 elite couples was the echoing silence of the empty wooden walls. The toddlers immediately sensed the bleak environment and began wailing even louder, their cries amplifying in the hollow, freezing space. The wealthy mothers stood frozen, staring in horror at the barren room. "Where are the nannies?" one of the mega-church elders' wives demanded, her voice echoing with sharp indignation. "There is no food in here. There are no changing stations. It is freezing cold." The initial confusion rapidly curdled into explosive, aggressive outrage. These were incredibly powerful individuals who were accustomed to having their every demand met instantly. They had dressed in their finest formal wear, expecting a luxurious evening of adult networking and uninterrupted celebration. Instead, They were standing in a freezing dark cabin holding screaming children and heavily soiled diaper bags with absolutely zero support in sight. The political donors did not politely wait for an explanation. They furiously pulled their smartphones from their designer clutches and immediately dialed DeAndre direct line. Down in the lavishly decorated grand ballroom, DeAndre was currently standing near the open bar holding a crystal flute of expensive champagne and attempting to project the image of a calm, confident political leader. His phone began vibrating violently in his tuxedo pocket. He excused himself from a conversation with a local judge and answered the call, flashing his signature fake smile. The smile instantly vanished the moment Councilman Davis began screaming through the receiver. Davis aggressively demanded to know why they were currently standing in a freezing dark room with 20 crying children and zero professional supervision. He threatened to pull his entire campaign endorsement right there on the spot, if the situation was not rectified in exactly 5 minutes. DeAndre's face drained of all color, turning an ashy pale gray. His heart hammered wildly against his ribs as sheer panic set in. He hung up the phone and frantically dialed my mother, Brenda. She was busy reapplying her lipstick in the grand ballroom restroom, preparing to make her grand entrance as the revered First Lady of the congregation. When she answered her phone, DeAndre did not even bother with a greeting. He frantically informed her that the VIP donors were currently staging a mutiny at the secondary cabin because the free babysitter had seemingly vanished into thin air. He demanded to know my exact location. My mother dropped her expensive lipstick into the sink, a cold sweat breaking out across her forehead as the catastrophic reality of the situation finally registered in her mind. Thousands of miles away from the freezing, chaotic mountain resort, the tropical evening air in Costa Rica was incredibly warm and perfectly serene. I was comfortably stretched out on a plush white sunbed positioned right on the edge of my private infinity pool. The setting sun painted the ocean horizon in brilliant shades of tangerine. I felt the gentle, salty breeze brush against my skin. I reached over to the small teakwood table beside me, picking up my smartphone and a tall, icy margarita rimmed with chili salt. I had kept my device on airplane mode for the entire day, intentionally allowing the panic in Aspen to reach its absolute boiling point before making myself available. I slowly dragged my thumb across the screen, disabling the airplane mode setting. The device instantly seized up, vibrating violently in my palm as dozens of frantic missed calls and desperate text messages flooded the screen. Before I could even read the first notification, the phone lit up with an incoming call. The caller identification displayed my mother name in bright, aggressive letters. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my spicy margarita, savoring the complex flavors before calmly swiping the green accept button. I held the phone to my ear, but did not say a single word. On the other end of the line, my mother sounded like a woman who was actively watching her entire world burn to the ground. "Simone, where are you?" she screamed, her voice cracking with hysterical rage and blind panic. "Why are you not here yet? The donors are threatening to leave. The children are destroying the cabin. Everyone is waiting for you. Get down to the secondary cabin right this second." Her frantic breathing echoed through the receiver, painting a vivid picture of the absolute nightmare currently unfolding in her precious social circle. She was demanding my compliance, still stubbornly clinging to the delusional belief that she could command my presence and force me into submission. I did not raise my voice or react to her frantic energy. I simply let out a rich, genuine laugh that bubbled up from deep inside my chest. It was the sound of a woman who had successfully reclaimed her entire existence. "Do not wait for me, mother," I replied, my tone smooth, icy, and perfectly controlled. "I am enjoying my vacation." There was a sudden suffocating silence on the other end of the line. The sheer magnitude of my response completely paralyzed her cognitive functions. For 3 agonizing seconds, she could not process the fact that her obedient free servant had actively orchestrated this massive, devastating sabotage. A few seconds later, the heavy silence broke. Through the receiver, all I could hear was absolute catastrophic chaos. I heard the unmistakable sound of adults panicking, heavy furniture crashing to the floor, and nearly 20 children screaming and crying wildly in the background as their perfect upper-class gala imploded. I smiled genuinely. I pulled the phone away from my ear, pressed the red end call button, and immediately went into my settings to permanently block her number. I set the phone face down on the table, picked up a silver fork, and took a slow, satisfying bite of fresh sliced mango. The scene inside the freezing secondary cabin in Aspen was rapidly devolving into a catastrophic political meltdown. Councilman Davis stood in the center of the barren room, holding his wailing twin toddlers against his bespoke Italian tuxedo. His face was contorted with a level of absolute fury that DeAndre had never witnessed before. The other 14 elite couples were aggressively murmuring among themselves, pulling out their smartphones to check for immediate return flights to Atlanta. They felt profoundly disrespected, and in their world, disrespect was the one unforgivable sin. DeAndre sprinted across the icy courtyard, his expensive leather dress shoes slipping dangerously on the slick black ice. He burst through the heavy oak doors of the cabin completely out of breath. He attempted to flash his signature charismatic smile, but it immediately melted under the scorching glares of the most powerful people in his political network. Councilman Davis did not even wait for an apology. He stepped forward, his voice booming with unmistakable authority. "We were promised a premium 5-star luxury childcare experience," DeAndre Davis roared, echoing off the empty wooden walls. "Instead, we are standing in a freezing dark storage shed, holding screaming infants with absolutely zero supervision in sight. I have major campaign donors standing right behind me who wrote massive checks based on your direct promises. If this situation is not completely resolved in the next 2 minutes, we are all walking out that door. We will pull every single political endorsement and demand a full refund of our campaign contributions by tomorrow morning." DeAndre felt all the blood rush out of his head, leaving him dizzy with blind terror. Losing these specific endorsements meant the absolute instantaneous death of his entire political career. He frantically pulled his phone from his pocket, dialing my mother number again, but it went straight to voicemail. He dialed my number and received the automated message indicating the line was disconnected. The horrifying reality finally crushed him. I was truly gone, and I was never coming back to save him. He looked wildly around the freezing room, watching the wealthy wives aggressively bundling their crying children back into their designer snowcoats. He had to produce a miracle out of thin air. He held up his hands, palms facing outward in a desperate gesture of surrender. "Please do not leave," DeAndre begged, his voice cracking under the immense pressure. "I give you my absolute word that your children will be watched by trusted family members right this very second. You go down to the grand ballroom, enjoy the open bar, and we will handle everything here personally." He was writing a blank check with his mouth that his wife and mother were going to be forced to cash. The donors exchanged highly skeptical looks, but the prospect of escaping the freezing cabin and the screaming children was too tempting to resist. Councilman Davis narrowed his eyes, pointing a stern finger directly at DeAndre's chest. "You have exactly 1 hour to prove this is handled," he warned harshly. "If I walk back up here and find my children neglected, my political action committee will personally ensure you never hold public office in the state of Georgia." DeAndre nodded frantically, bowing his head like an obedient servant. He watched them march out, leaving him completely alone with 20 highly chaotic children. DeAndre sprinted back to the main lodge, bursting into the luxurious grand ballroom where the remainder of our family was casually sipping champagne. Tiara, Vanessa, and Mother Brenda were standing near the towering ice sculpture, completely oblivious to the ticking time bomb threatening to destroy their social standing. They were draped in thousands of dollars of haute couture. Tiara was wearing a skin-tight custom beaded gown that restricted her movement to tiny elegant steps. Vanessa proudly sported a fresh immaculate silk press and a delicate white silk dress that swept the polished floor. First Lady Brenda was dripping in heavy gold jewelry and a stiff structured blazer meant to project unyielding religious authority. DeAndre grabbed Tiara by her diamond-covered wrist, dragging her forcefully away from the bar. He quickly corralled Vanessa and my mother, pushing all 3 women toward the exit doors. "What on earth are you doing?" Mother Brenda hissed angrily, trying to smooth her wrinkled blazer. "I was just about to introduce myself to the mayor wife." "You are going to the secondary cabin right now." DeAndre barked, his tone completely stripped of its usual respectful deference. Simone is not coming. She blocked our numbers and left the country. The VIP guests are threatening to destroy my entire campaign if their children are not supervised. You three are going to watch those kids for the rest of the night. The three women stopped dead in their tracks, their faces dropping in synchronized horror. Tiara let out a loud, dramatic gasp, clutching her chest. You want me to watch 20 random screaming children while wearing a $3,000 hand-beaded gown? She shrieked, her voice echoing in the quiet hallway. I am the wife of the candidate. I belong in the ballroom networking. Vanessa immediately backed away, shaking her head vehemently. Absolutely not, she declared, crossing her arms. I spent 4 hours at the salon today. I am not ruining my hair or risking my designer clothes to chase snotty-nosed brats around a freezing wooden shack. Call a local babysitting service, DeAndre. DeAndre's face twisted into a mask of pure, desperate rage. There are no local services available on New Year Eve, he growled, practically shaking with fury. I just emptied the church emergency fund to pay for the ballroom, so we are completely broke. If those donors walk out tonight, we are all ruined. Dad will lose his church backers and I will go bankrupt. You are going to walk into that cabin and you are going to smile while you do it. He physically pushed them through the heavy exterior doors, out into the freezing mountain blizzard. The three women shivered violently in their thin formal wear, stumbling across the icy courtyard in their 6-inch stiletto heels. They pushed open the door to the secondary cabin and were instantly assaulted by a wall of deafening, high-pitched screaming. 20 unattended children were running wildly in circles, throwing heavy wooden blocks and crying for their parents. The luxurious evening they had envisioned evaporated, instantly replaced by the very nightmare they had maliciously designed for me. The descent into absolute misery was swift and utterly merciless. Tiara attempted to assert dominance over the chaotic room, clapping her hands and demanding order from the wealthy children. Instead of listening, a deeply distressed toddler charged directly at her, grabbing fistfuls of her delicate beaded gown with sticky chocolate-covered fingers. Tiara shrieked in horror, trying to pry the child away without ripping the expensive fabric. As she leaned down, the overwhelmed toddler let out a loud, wet burp and violently projectile vomited sour milk and half-digested crackers straight down the front of her $3,000 dress. The acidic-smelling liquid soaked instantly into the intricate beadwork, ruining the garment beyond repair. Tiara dropped to her knees on the freezing floor, sobbing hysterically as the physical reality of her ruined night finally broke her spirit. Across the room, Vanessa was living out her own personal hell. A group of aggressive preteens had discovered a box of craft supplies and were currently smearing bright industrial-strength finger paint all over the wooden walls. Vanessa lunged forward to snatch a jar of bright red paint from a defiant 8-year-old boy. The child yanked the jar back forcefully, causing Vanessa to slip in her towering stilettos. She slammed her hands down hard against a rustic wooden table to catch her fall. A loud, sharp crack echoed over the screaming. Vanessa shrieked in genuine agony, holding up her hands. 3 of her meticulously crafted acrylic nails had snapped clean off at the nail bed, exposing raw, bleeding skin underneath. Her fresh, immaculate silk press was already reverting to a frizzy, puffed-out mess due to the intense, nervous sweat pouring down her forehead. Meanwhile, First Lady Brenda was experiencing the ultimate destruction of her dignified religious persona. The woman who normally commanded entire congregations from a golden pulpit was currently crawling around on her hands and knees under a dusty sofa, trying to drag a screaming toddler out of hiding. Her stiff, authoritative blazer was covered in dirt and crushed cracker crumbs. Her heavy gold jewelry snagged awkwardly on the rough wooden floorboards, scratching her skin. She was sweating profusely, her makeup melting down her face in messy streaks as she chased energetic children who blatantly ignored her commands. She was completely stripped of her power, her title and her dignity, reduced to a frantic, desperate caretaker in a freezing mountain shack. They were trapped in a sensory nightmare of dirty diapers, spilled juice, and deafening tantrums. This was the exact miserable, isolating fate they had so casually planned to inflict upon me, simply because they viewed my independence as an invitation for exploitation. They thought they could easily dump their burdens onto my shoulders and dance the night away. Instead, they were actively choking on the bitter consequences of their own toxic entitlement. As the clock slowly ticked toward 9 o'clock, They had absolutely no idea that their current physical humiliation was merely the warm-up act for the catastrophic social and financial explosion that was about to hit them with full force. Down inside the opulent grand ballroom, the atmosphere was dripping with forced elegance and fragile political posturing. The massive crystal chandeliers cast a warm golden glow over the circular tables draped in heavy white linen and adorned with towering floral centerpieces. DeAndre stood near the front of the room, adjusting the lapels of his rented tuxedo while desperately trying to mask the intense nervous perspiration gathering on his forehead. The temporary absence of the 15 angry couples who had stormed up to the secondary cabin had left a noticeable dent in the crowd, but the remaining wealthy donors and high-ranking church elders still expected a spectacular evening. DeAndre knew he had to deliver the performance of his lifetime to salvage his crumbling campaign. He signaled the string quartet to stop playing and strode confidently toward the glass podium, tapping the microphone to command the attention of the room. My esteemed friends, colleagues, and brothers and sisters in faith. DeAndre began his voice, projecting a fake velvety smoothness that completely masked his internal panic. We are gathered here tonight in this beautiful winter sanctuary to celebrate the dawn of a new year and a new vision for our beloved city of Atlanta. Pastor Calvin sat at the primary VIP table nodding solemnly and offering a loud amen to project an aura of divine endorsement. Jamal sat right beside him, swirling a glass of expensive bourbon, completely oblivious to the fact that his own personal nightmare was rapidly approaching. DeAndre gripped the edges of the podium, leaning forward to deliver his meticulously rehearsed political talking points. I built my campaign on the unbreakable pillars of absolute trust, deep community investment, and unwavering family values. DeAndre declared, his voice rising with theatrical passion. We live in a society that often forgets the importance of sacrifice and serving others. But in my family, we lead by example. We believe in uplifting our community, protecting our children, and honoring the generous contributions of the leaders sitting in this very room tonight. The sheer audacity of his speech was staggering. He was actively preaching about protecting children while his own wife and mother were currently being tortured by those exact same neglected toddlers in a freezing shed just a few hundred yards away. He spoke passionately about honoring financial contributions, knowing full well he had just illegally drained a sacred church emergency fund and attempted to commit felony identity theft just to keep the lights on in this room. Several of the wealthy donors nodded in agreement, raising their crystal champagne flutes in a silent toast to his profound display of fake integrity. DeAndre smiled, soaking in the validation, feeling a momentary rush of arrogant relief. He truly believed he had successfully weathered the storm and salvaged his political future. He glanced up at the large ornate clock hanging above the massive ballroom entrance, completely unaware that his stolen time was officially up and complete public ruin instantly awaited him. The ornate grandfather clock stationed by the mahogany ballroom doors struck exactly 9 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. The heavy brass pendulum swung with a deep, resonating thud that vibrated beneath the soft jazz music floating through the room. DeAndre took a deep breath, opening his mouth to deliver the grand concluding lines of his fraudulent political speech. Before he could utter a single syllable, an incredibly jarring phenomenon occurred. Every single smartphone in the grand ballroom chimed simultaneously. It was not just a few scattered notifications. It was a synchronized, deafening chorus of digital alerts erupting from the suit jackets and designer clutch purses of every powerful individual in the room. The high-pitched symphony of Apple and Android notification sounds completely drowned out DeAndre voice. Members of the Divine Nine city councilmen and wealthy mega-church elders paused their conversations, frowning in collective confusion. It is extremely rare for an entire room of high-net-worth individuals to receive a notification at the exact same millisecond, unless an absolute emergency has occurred. The guests instinctively reached into their pockets, pulling out their glowing devices. The dim romantic lighting of the luxury ballroom was suddenly shattered by the harsh bright glow of dozens of smartphone screens illuminating the perplexed faces of the Atlanta political elite. Pastor Calvin furrowed his brow, setting his expensive bourbon glass down on the white linen tablecloth. He retrieved his phone from his inner jacket pocket, squinting through his reading glasses. Jamal, who was already heavily intoxicated, fumbled with his device, nearly dropping it onto his dessert plate. DeAndre stood frozen at the podium, his confident smile faltering as he watched his entire audience look down at their screens instead of up at him. "Is everything all right, folks?" DeAndre asked nervously, his voice echoing awkwardly through the microphone. A heavy, suffocating tension instantly gripped the room. The VIP guests stared at their lock screens, reading the bold, capitalized subject line of the email that had just successfully bypassed all their spam filters. Urgent ethics disclosure. DeAndre political campaign fraud. It was sent from a highly encrypted anonymous server, guaranteeing that the contents could not be traced or immediately deleted by any public relations. Crisis team. The wealthy wives, who were already simmering with intense irritation over the freezing cabin debacle, tapped the email application with aggressive urgency. They read the brief clinical text detailing the misappropriation of campaign funds and the deliberate deception regarding the promised luxury childcare services. Their eyes widened in sheer disbelief as they processed the magnitude of the betrayal. They noticed the high-definition audio file attached to the bottom of the email. A prominent city councilwoman standing directly in the front row tapped the glowing play button without bothering to connect her wireless earbuds. The wealthy donors, seated at the surrounding tables, immediately followed her lead, pressing play on their own devices. The digital explosive device I had, meticulously constructed in my penthouse, officially detonated, destroying everything instantly and completely. The horrific sound of DeAndre's arrogant, unedited voice began echoing simultaneously from dozens of smartphones, creating a staggered, surreal chorus of absolute betrayal that bounced off the mahogany walls of the grand ballroom. "I cannot afford to look broke in front of these donors," the recorded voice hissed. The high-definition audio played with terrifying clarity, cutting through the stunned silence of the room like a jagged knife. "Just throw all the kids in the secondary cabin and tell Simone to watch them, my mother." Callous voice suddenly blasted from the speakers, carrying her signature manipulative tone. "She does not have a family or plans anyway. It is her duty to serve this family." The wives of the city council members gasped collectively, pressing their manicured hands over their open mouths. They stared at the podium where DeAndre stood, completely paralyzed, his face draining of all color, turning an ashy pale gray. The absolute worst part of the recording finally hit the speakers broadcasting. DeAndre's explicit, unfiltered contempt for his biggest financial backers. "Stupid rich snobs whose annoying kids I am going to dump on my sister to save a buck." The recording boomed loudly. The entire ballroom erupted into an immediate explosive uproar. A prominent donor threw his crystal champagne flute directly onto the polished wooden floor, shattering it into 100 glittering pieces. "How dare you scam us, you arrogant, pathetic fraud!" The donor roared aggressively, pointing a shaking finger directly at DeAndre's chest. "You take our money, you neglect our children in a freezing cabin, and you stand up here preaching about family values. You are completely finished in Atlanta." Every single political donor and megachurch elder stood up from their tables in absolute disgust. Pastor Calvin desperately scrambled out of his VIP chair, his religious facade completely shattered. He lunged forward, holding up his hands in a frantic attempt to pacify the enraged crowd. "Brothers and sisters, please, Pastor," Calvin pleaded, his voice cracking with sheer panic. "This audio has been maliciously manipulated. We can explain everything." But the congregation leaders were not listening. An elder who had funded my father's ministry for over 20 years shoved Pastor Calvin hands away roughly. "Save your lies." Calvin the elder spat, his face twisted in profound disappointment. "You are just as corrupt as your fraudulent son-in-law. I will personally ensure the executive board strips you of your pulpit by tomorrow morning." DeAndre tried to grab the microphone to defend himself, but a furious city councilwoman stepped forward and forcefully yanked the microphone cord straight out of the amplifier, silencing him completely. The political donors grabbed their expensive coats, abandoning the gala and storming out of the ballroom in a unified, furious exodus. DeAndre dropped to his knees behind the glass podium, hyperventilating as he watched his entire political career, his wealthy social network and his family's pristine reputation disintegrate into absolute nothingness, right before his terrified eyes. I had completely obliterated their empire entirely alone. The furious exodus of the political donors did not stop at the mahogany doors of the grand ballroom. The angry mob of wealthy elites marched aggressively through the carpeted hallways of the luxury resort, shrugging on their heavy mink coats and designer winter jackets. They were loudly demanding that the concierge immediately retrieve their vehicles from the valet. Pastor Calvin chased desperately after them, his pastoral authority completely evaporated. He was sweating profusely, begging and pleading with the city councilman to give him 5 minutes to explain the malicious audio recording. But they completely ignored his pathetic groveling. Jamal, who was severely intoxicated and clutching a fresh glass of bourbon, stumbled out of the ballroom, trailing closely behind the chaotic procession. Had absolutely no idea what had just occurred in the ballroom, having been too distracted by the open bar to check his email. He simply followed the wealthy crowd into the main lobby, assuming the party was relocating to another area of the resort. The massive main lobby featured spectacular floor-to-ceiling glass windows that offered a panoramic view of the snowy mountain landscape and the exclusive VIP circular driveway. Just as the enraged donors reached the glass exit doors, the dark, freezing aspen night was suddenly violently pierced by an intense barrage of flashing yellow strobe lights. The harsh mechanical glare bounced aggressively off the pristine white snow, illuminating the furious faces of the Atlanta political elite. Everyone stopped dead in their tracks, staring out through the glass. A massive industrial, heavy-duty tow truck had bypassed the security gate and was currently backing aggressively into the highly restricted VIP valet section. The revving of the loud diesel engine and the harsh clanking of thick steel chains echoed loudly, cutting through the serene mountain atmosphere. The wealthy donors stood in the lobby, completely bewildered by the sudden intrusion of a rugged, commercial towing vehicle into their exclusive luxury environment. The massive truck aligned itself perfectly with the most expensive vehicle parked in the very center of the valet stand. It was a sleek, customized jet black Mercedes-Benz, heavily tinted and freshly detailed. It was the exact same luxury vehicle that Jamal constantly weaponized to project an aura of immense generational wealth and unyielding financial success. He used that specific car to intimidate lower-income church members and to validate his arrogant status as the untouchable golden child of the family. Now the heavy hydraulic lift of the tow truck was sliding aggressively under the front tires of his prized possession, locking the wheels into an inescapable metal grip. Jamal stood frozen inside the warm lobby, his drunken brain struggling to process the horrifying mechanical violation occurring right on the other side of the glass. His expensive crystal bourbon glass slipped from his trembling fingers, shattering loudly against the polished stone floor. The sharp sound of the breaking glass broke his paralysis, and pure, unadulterated panic completely took over his entire body. "Wait, stop! What are you doing?" Jamal screamed at the top of his lungs, his voice cracking with sheer terror. He shoved his way past the bewildered city councilman and sprinted frantically through the sliding glass doors out into the freezing mountain blizzard. He was wearing nothing but a thin, custom-tailored tuxedo jacket and slippery leather dress shoes. He hit the icy pavement of the VIP driveway and immediately lost his footing, skidding wildly across the frozen slush before slamming his knees hard onto the concrete. He did not even pause to assess his injuries. He scrambled desperately to his feet, running directly toward the massive yellow truck. "You cannot take that car, you incompetent idiot!" Jamal roared aggressively, waving his arms and trying to physically wedge his body between the hydraulic lift and the front bumper of his Mercedes. "Do you have any idea who I am? I am a prominent real estate investor in Atlanta. You are making a massive legal mistake." The repo man stepped casually out of the truck cab, completely unbothered by Jamal. Frantic theatrical performance. How was a burly, rugged mountain local, wearing heavy insulated coveralls and holding a thick metal clipboard, he did not flinch or back down when Jamal lunged aggressively toward him. "Step away from the recovery equipment, sir." The repo man commanded, his voice booming loudly enough for the entire crowd of wealthy donors standing inside the glass lobby to hear perfectly clearly. This vehicle is officially classified as a highly delinquent flight asset. It is being legally seized on behalf of the primary automotive financing institution. Jamal's face turned an alarming shade of purple as the freezing snow accumulated on his expensive tuxedo. "No, you are lying!" he screamed wildly, looking back at the glass windows to see if the political elites were watching them. They were absolutely watching every single pathetic second. "I paid that bill. I mailed the check last week. This is a luxury rental property and you are trespassing on private grounds. Unhook my vehicle right this second, or I will sue you for everything you own." The repo man let out a loud, abrasive laugh that echoed across the snowy driveway. He flipped open his metal clipboard and pulled out a bright pink legal document, tapping it firmly with his thick gloved finger. "I do not care if you are the President of the United States," Buddy the repo man shouted back, ensuring his voice carried maximum volume. "You have not made a single car payment in 4 entire months. You are severely in default, and the bank wants their property back right now. If you touch my hydraulic rig again, I will have the local Aspen police arrest you for interfering with a lawful asset recovery operation." He climbed back into the cab of the truck, pulling the heavy hydraulic lever. The front end of the pristine black Mercedes lifted violently into the air, the tires separating from the snowy pavement. The ultimate symbol of my brother. Fake prosperity was officially chained and suspended, ready to be hauled away to an impound lot. The wealthy political donors standing inside the warm lobby watched the entire humiliating spectacle unfold, with expressions of absolute profound disgust. They had just discovered via the leaked audio file that this family viewed them as stupid rich snobs to be exploited for free childcare and campaign funds. Now they were actively witnessing the golden child of that exact same corrupt family, physically wrestling a repo man in the snow over 4 months of unpaid car notes. The sheer magnitude of the financial fraud and social deception was staggering. Just as the tow truck began to slowly pull the elevated Mercedes out of the circular driveway, the heavy wooden doors of the lobby flew open. Tierra, Vanessa, and First Lady Brenda stumbled into the crowded space looking like absolute catastrophic disasters. Vanessa's pristine white silk dress was smeared with bright red industrial finger paint and smelled strongly of sour milk and soiled diapers. Her expensive silk press was a frizzy, tangled nightmare, and she was actively bleeding from 3 violently broken acrylic nails. She took one look out the floor-to-ceiling glass windows and let out a blood-curdling shriek of pure agony as she watched her husband's prized luxury vehicle being hauled away by a bright yellow tow truck. "Jamal," she screamed, dropping to her knees in the middle of the lobby, burying her face in her paint-stained hands. The political donors and mega-church elders shook their heads in pure contempt, stepping around my weeping mother and my ruined sisters as they finally exited the resort. The family's entire social standing, religious authority, and political future had been utterly annihilated in a matter of minutes, thousands of miles away. I was lounging comfortably on my private sunbed on the warm tropical beaches of Costa Rica. The ocean breeze felt absolutely incredible against my skin. I picked up my smartphone and clicked on a highly encrypted secure web link. It was a direct live feed from the tow truck dashboard camera provided by the repo man as a professional courtesy for my generous $2,000 finder's fee. Tip: I watched the high-definition footage of Jamal sprinting frantically behind the departing tow truck, slipping on the ice and falling flat on his face in the dirty gray slush, while the flashing amber strobe lights faded into the snowy mountain distance. I let out a rich, melodious laugh that carried over the sound of the crashing ocean waves. I took another slow, luxurious sip of my expensive vintage wine, savoring the absolute perfection of the moment. I had not yelled, I had not cried, and I had not thrown a single emotional tantrum. I simply utilized their own overwhelming arrogance against them, tearing down their fraudulent empire brick by brick and exposing their toxic reality to the entire world. The board was completely cleared, and the game was officially over. I turned off my phone, closed my eyes, and listened to the peaceful sound of the tropical tide washing against the pristine shore. feeling totally, completely, and unconditionally free forever. Exactly 1 week after the catastrophic implosion at the Aspen Resort, I returned to Atlanta. I walked through the sliding glass doors of the international terminal, feeling completely rejuvenated. My skin was glowing with a rich golden tan from 7 days of uninterrupted tropical sunshine, and my mind was incredibly sharp. The private car service dropped me off right in front of my luxury condominium building. As my driver unloaded my designer luggage, I immediately noticed an aggressive, chaotic cluster of people blocking the secure glass entrance to my building. My entire family was standing on the pristine concrete sidewalk, looking like a collective natural disaster. Mother Brenda was openly weeping, clutching a crumpled tissue and wearing dark sunglasses to hide her heavily swollen eyes. DeAndre was pacing furiously back and forth, pointing an accusing finger at the building's security guard, who was firmly denying them access. Jamal stood near the curb, kicking the tires of an old rented sedan, looking completely unhinged because his precious luxury vehicle was currently sitting in a frozen impound lot thousands of miles away. Tiara was holding one of her screaming toddlers, looking utterly exhausted and thoroughly defeated. The moment they spotted me stepping out of the private town car, they descended like a pack of desperate, starving wolves. DeAndre charged forward, his face twisted in absolute rage, screaming that I had maliciously sabotaged his political career and threatening to sue me for defamation. Jamal aggressively stepped into my personal space, loudly demanding that I immediately write him a check to buy a brand new car and retrieve his impounded vehicle. Mother Brenda reached out with trembling hands, wailing about how I had embarrassed the ministry and destroyed the sacred family legacy. They were loud, completely unhinged, and desperately trying to reassert their dominance over my life. I did not flinch back away or offer a single word of apology. I stood, perfectly still, adjusting my designer sunglasses, and looked at them with complete emotional detachment. "You are blocking my entrance," I stated, my voice radiating absolute icy authority. I snapped my fingers, signaling the tall man in the tailored charcoal suit who had been quietly waiting for me in the lobby of my building. This was Marcus, my ruthless corporate attorney who charged $800 an hour and specialized in aggressive financial litigation. He stepped smoothly through the glass doors, holding a thick stack of manila folders. DeAndre immediately stopped screaming, his political bravado evaporating the second he recognized the presence of high-powered legal counsel. Marcus did not offer a greeting. He simply thrust a heavy document directly against DeAndre's chest. DeAndre reflexively grabbed the folder, his eyes scanning the bold red lettering on the front page. "You have just been officially served with a civil and criminal lawsuit for felony identity theft and severe credit card fraud," Marcus declared, his voice booming across the busy sidewalk. "We have fully documented proof that you forged my client's signature and illegally weaponized her social security number. The authorities have already been notified of your criminal actions." DeAndre's knees physically buckled under the weight of his impending federal prosecution. Marcus then turned to my parents, pulling two more crisp legal envelopes from his leather briefcase. He handed them directly to Pastor Calvin and Mother Brenda. "These are court-ordered restraining orders," Marcus explained coldly. "You are legally barred from coming within 500 feet of my client, her residence, or her corporate workplace. If you attempt to harass her again, you will be immediately arrested." I stepped forward, closing the distance between myself and my sister Tiara. She was staring at the legal documents in absolute horror, clutching her crying toddler tightly against her chest. "You wanted me to be the help," I said, my voice low, smooth and dripping with absolute finality. "Now you can help yourselves to a bankruptcy lawyer." I signaled the building security guard to open the heavy glass doors. I walked past their frozen, devastated bodies, without a single glance backward. I stepped into the private elevator, swiped my key fob, and watched the metal doors slowly slide shut forever, locking out the toxic chaos they had brought to my doorstep. Flash forward, exactly 3 months later, and the dust has permanently settled over the smoking ruins of their arrogant empire. DeAndre is currently under a massive federal investigation for campaign finance fraud and identity theft, completely blacklisted from every political circle in the state of Georgia. Pastor Calvin and Mother Brenda were officially forced to resign from their prestigious megachurch after the executive board voted unanimously to strip them of their religious authority. They lost their sprawling estate and currently live in a cramped rental property. Tiara and Jamal are both drowning in overwhelming debt, struggling to survive without the endless financial bailouts they used to steal from my bank accounts. As for me, I am sitting behind a massive, polished desk in my brand new corner office overlooking the beautiful, vibrant Atlanta skyline. I recently launched my own independent luxury real estate brokerage, and my client roster is absolutely overflowing with high net worth individuals. I am unbothered, thriving, and completely free from the suffocating weight of their emotional abuse. The profound peace I feel right now is worth far more than any amount of money. Family is not determined by shared blood or a common last name. Family is defined by mutual respect, unconditional support, and genuine care. And if they dare to treat you like a disposable servant, make absolutely certain that you charge them the ultimate price. Have you ever had to draw a ruthless boundary to protect your own peace from toxic relatives? Tell me your story in the comments. Below, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about reclaiming your power and never apologizing for your success. I will gladly read every single comment you leave down there, and I promise to respond to the very best ones.